The rifle weighed 33 pounds. The target was 3,800 meters away. Mountain winds gusting at 18 miles per hour. Every military expert said the shot was impossible. Then Emily Rodriguez pulled the trigger. For 5.2 seconds, a single bullet traveled through space and time to make history. They're still trying to understand how she did it. Colonel Marcus Williams had seen everything during his 18 years with Army Special Forces. He had fought in Iraq, Syria, and countless classified operations across 4 continents. His weathered hands had held every weapon in the military arsenal, and his sharp eyes had spotted enemy movements from impossible distances. But nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed that sweltering afternoon at Fort Bragg. The North Carolina sun beat down mercilessly as Williams observed the annual inter-service sniper competition. Representatives from every branch of the military had gathered to prove their shooting skills. The Marines brought their cocky attitudes and polished rifles. The Navy arrived with their SEAL marksmen and decades of combat experience. The Air Force showed up with their precision instruments and calculated approaches. Then there was the Army contingent, mostly Rangers and Special Forces like himself, confident in their abilities. But among all these seasoned warriors stood someone completely unexpected that a young woman, barely looking old enough to be out of college, was carefully assembling a massive Barrett M107, a 1.50 caliber rifle. Her movements were precise and methodical, each component sliding into place with practiced ease. She wore standard military fatigues, but something about her presence commanded attention without demanding it. Before we continue, please comment below where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe to the She Force Tales channel. Williams found himself drawn to her preparation ritual. While other competitors joked nervously or checked their equipment multiple times, she worked in complete silence. Her fingers moved across the weapon like a pianist touching familiar keys. The Barrett, weighing nearly 33 pounds when fully loaded, looked almost delicate in her capable hands. She adjusted the scope with tiny movements, each calibration deliberate and purposeful. The other competitors began to notice her too. As the competitors took their positions, Williams noticed something remarkable about the young woman's setup. While others chose elevated positions or complex supports, she selected a simple prone position on flat ground. Her Barrett was supported by a basic bipod, nothing fancy or high-tech. She lay behind the massive rifle, her eyes settling behind the scope with natural ease. The first target was announced at 900 meters. For most rifles, this would be considered long range. For the Barrett .50 caliber, it was almost insultingly close. One by one, the competitors took their shots. Some hit center mass, others clipped the edges. A few missed entirely, their bullets kicking up dust clouds behind the targets. When her turn came, the woman settled behind her rifle with fluid motion. She controlled her breathing, her finger finding the trigger with gentle precision. The Barrett roared like thunder, its massive muzzle brake redirecting the explosive gases in violent clouds. The recoil, capable of bruising even experienced shooters, seemed to barely affect her small frame. The target spotter's voice crackled over the radio with barely contained excitement. Not only had she hit the center ring, but her bullet had created a hole so perfectly placed that it looked like it had been drilled by a machine. The gathered crowd began to pay serious attention to this unexpected competitor. Williams felt his eyebrows raise involuntarily. In all his years of military service, he had rarely seen such precision from a first shot at distance. The competition continued with targets at greater distances: 1,100 meters, 1,400 meters, 1,700 meters. With each increasing challenge, more competitors began to struggle. Wind estimation became crucial. Bullet drop calculations grew more complex. The margin for error shrank to almost nothing. But the young woman continued her methodical approach. She would study each target for long moments, reading wind indicators that others missed. Her shots came with mechanical regularity, each one finding its mark with devastating accuracy. Other competitors started gathering behind her position, watching her technique with growing amazement. Even the range officers who had seen thousands of military marksmen over the years began clustering around her firing point. Williams found himself completely absorbed in watching her work. This was no lucky beginner or one-day wonder. Every movement she made spoke of years of dedicated training and natural talent refined to its absolute peak. As the competition moved into its second phase, the targets were positioned at distances that would challenge even the most elite military snipers. 2,200 meters stretched across the desert range, where heat waves created dancing mirages that could fool the most experienced eyes. At this distance, a bullet would take nearly 3.5 seconds to reach its target, enough time for wind conditions to change multiple times during flight. Williams watched as seasoned Marine snipers began to show signs of strain. These are men who had made confirmed kills in combat situations. Yet they were struggling with the mathematical precision required for these extreme distances. The young woman remained unchanged. She lay behind her Barrett with the same calm demeanor she had displayed at 900 meters. While others used wind flags, atmospheric measuring devices, and complex ballistic calculators, she seemed to rely on instincts developed through countless hours of practice. Her next shot came after what appeared to be minimal preparation. The Barrett's thunderous report echoed across the range, followed by the whistling sound of the massive bullet cutting through desert air. 3.5 seconds of absolute silence stretched across the watching crowd. Then the spotter's voice crackled with disbelief over the radio system. Another perfect center hit. At 2,200 meters with shifting winds and brutal heat distortion, she had placed her bullet exactly where she intended. The gathered military personnel exchanged glances of amazement. This level of accuracy was bordering on the impossible. The competition organizers announced the next phase with obvious excitement. Targets would now be placed at the absolute maximum effective range for the Barrett .50 caliber rifle, 2,700 meters. At this distance, even a perfect shot could be defeated by a sudden gust of wind or a tiny miscalculation in elevation. Most military snipers had never attempted shots at such extreme ranges outside of very specific combat situations. Several competitors chose to withdraw rather than risk embarrassing misses. The remaining shooters included only the most confident marksmen from each service branch. The young woman showed no hesitation. She adjusted her scope with tiny increments, her movements precise and confident. Williams noticed that she was making calculations in her head rather than using the electronic devices favored by other competitors. When her turn arrived, she settled into her shooting position with familiar ease. The target at 2,700 meters was barely visible to the naked eye. Through powerful spotting scopes, it appeared as a small dark circle shimmering in the heat distortion. She held her position for what seemed like an eternity, reading conditions that others couldn't perceive. The gathered crowd had fallen completely silent, sensing they might be witnessing something extraordinary. The Barrett's report was deafening in the desert stillness. The bullet's distinctive crack echoed across the range as it began its 4-second journey to the distant target. Everyone present counted off the seconds silently. When the spotter's voice finally crackled over the radio, his excitement was unmistakable. Not only had she hit the target, but once again, her bullet had found the exact center of the scoring rings. At 2,700 meters in difficult conditions, she had achieved what many considered the perfect long-range shot. The gathered military personnel erupted in spontaneous applause. Even her competitors joined in, recognizing they had witnessed something remarkable. Williams found himself clapping along with the others, genuinely impressed by what he had seen. But the woman remained focused on her rifle, already preparing for the next challenge. She showed no emotion at the praise, no acknowledgement of the extraordinary nature of her achievement. The competition continued with moving targets, adding an entirely new level of complexity. Now shooters had to calculate not just wind and distance, but also the speed and direction of their targets. Lead time became crucial, requiring split-second timing and perfect prediction of target movement. The moving target phase separated the truly elite marksmen from the merely skilled. Mechanical targets began sliding along rails at various speeds and directions, simulating real combat scenarios where enemy personnel rarely remained stationary. Williams watched as a highly decorated Marine sniper lined up his shot on a target, moving at 18 miles per hour across his field of view. The Marine had 4 confirmed kills in Syria and was considered one of the Corps' finest marksmen. He calculated lead time carefully, adjusted for wind drift, and fired with confidence. His bullet struck 3 feet behind the moving target, hitting empty air where the target had been moments before. The young woman observed each failed attempt with quiet attention, as if studying lessons from others' mistakes. When her turn arrived, she seemed to enter an almost meditative state. Her shot came at what appeared to be the worst possible moment. The target was accelerating, wind conditions were shifting, and heat distortion was at its peak. When her shot came, it was accompanied by complete silence from the watching crowd. The bullet's flight time stretched to nearly 4.5 seconds, an eternity during which wind conditions could change dramatically. The impact was confirmed with shocked disbelief from the spotters. Her bullet had not only found the small exposed portion of the target, but it struck it precisely in the center. At 2,900 meters with difficult wind conditions and a target smaller than a human head, she had achieved what many considered impossible. As the competition concluded, the young woman began disassembling her Barrett with the same methodical care she had shown throughout the day. When the final scores were announced, she had achieved perfect scores in every category, setting new records for accuracy, consistency, and overall performance. Following the award ceremony, Williams approached her as she performed final maintenance on her Barrett. She looked up as he approached, her eyes showing neither surprise nor concern. There was something in her gaze that spoke of experiences far beyond her apparent age. When he asked about her background, she provided only basic information. Her name was Emily Rodriguez, and she served with an Army unit that she described simply as specialized reconnaissance. However, as they talked, small details began emerging that painted a picture of extraordinary experience. She mentioned adjusting for elevation differences, like in the Rockies, suggesting mountain warfare experience. She referenced humidity corrections needed during monsoon season, implying deployments to Southeast Asia. Most tellingly, she spoke about wind patterns with the familiarity of someone who had learned to read them under life-or-death circumstances. During a casual comment about bullet performance at extreme altitude, Emily mentioned making the longest confirmed shot during a mission she couldn't discuss in detail. When Williams pressed for more information, she became evasive, but did mention that the shot had been recorded at just over 3,500 meters. Williams felt his breath catch. 3,500 meters was beyond the effective range of most sniper rifles. At that distance, environmental factors became so significant that successful shots required not just exceptional skill, but also perfect conditions and considerable luck. If Emily was telling the truth, she held one of the longest confirmed kill records in modern military history. Yet she had mentioned it casually, as if extreme-range shooting was simply part of her normal duties. 6 months later, the night before the operation, Emily conducted detailed reconnaissance using satellite imagery and topographic maps. Her analysis included wind pattern predictions, temperature variations throughout the day, and even the angle of sunlight that would affect visibility. The climb to her overwatch position required 8 hours through difficult mountain terrain. Emily carried her equipment and supplies with the endurance of someone accustomed to such physical demands. The shooting position offered spectacular views of the Rocky Mountains, but also presented significant challenges. Wind patterns were constantly changing as air masses moved through the valleys. Temperature variations created atmospheric distortion that made precise range estimation difficult. Emily established her position when the convoy stopped in the mountain pass, exactly 3,847 meters from Emily's position, according to her laser rangefinder. Intelligence confirmed that the primary target had exited one of the vehicles and was standing in clear view. Emily's final preparations took place with mechanical precision. She adjusted her scope for the exact measured distance, accounting for the severe downward angle of the shot and the atmospheric conditions that had been building throughout the morning. Williams watched through his own spotting scope as Emily controlled her breathing to the precise rhythm she had perfected over years of extreme-range shooting. Her finger found the trigger of the massive rifle, applying pressure with the same delicate touch she had demonstrated at Fort Bragg months earlier. The Barrett's thunderous report echoed across the mountain valley like an avalanche. Through the dust and smoke, Williams could see that the recoil had barely moved Emily's small frame, testament to her perfect shooting position and years of experience. The bullet's supersonic crack faded into mountain silence as it began its 5.2-second journey across the valley. At this distance, with the severe environmental challenges they faced, even Emily couldn't be certain of success until impact was confirmed. Impact came with a finality that was both shocking and clinical. Through their high-powered optics, they could see that Emily's bullet had found its intended target with devastating precision. As they began their descent from the overwatch position, Williams found himself processing what he had witnessed. The shot Emily had just completed represented one of the longest confirmed kills in military history, achieved under conditions that made success almost impossible. During the difficult climb down the mountain, Emily finally opened up about her background and training. She had been recruited for a classified program that developed extreme-range precision capabilities for situations exactly like the one they had just completed. Her training had taken place at remote facilities where she had practice shots at distances that pushed both equipment and human capability to their absolute limits. The 3,500-meter shot she had mentioned at Fort Bragg had been just one of several record-setting engagements during her operational career. Emily explained that extreme-range precision shooting required more than just technical skill and superior equipment. The mental discipline needed to maintain focus during multi-second bullet flight times was something that couldn't be taught through traditional training methods. As they reached the base camp, Williams reflected on how Emily represented an evolution in military capabilities that few people understood. Her combination of natural talent, advanced training, and combat experience had created abilities that bordered on the superhuman. The mission debriefing was conducted with clinical precision typical of special operations. Emily's shot was recorded in official records with understated language that failed to capture the extraordinary nature of what had been accomplished. 3 days later, Emily departed on another assignment that Williams wasn't cleared to know about. Her farewell was professional but warm, acknowledging the unique experience they had shared in the Colorado mountains. Months after returning from Colorado, Williams occasionally found himself thinking about Emily and the extraordinary capabilities she represented. He realized that modern warfare had created a small group of specialists whose skills transcended conventional military categories. The official record of her 3,847-meter shot remained classified, known only to a select few who had been present for the mission. But among those who understood extreme-range precision shooting, Emily had achieved something approaching legendary status. Williams never saw Emily again, but he occasionally heard rumors about impossible shots being made in remote locations around the world. Whether these stories involved Emily or other operators trained to similar standards, he could never confirm. Years later, when Williams had retired from active duty and was teaching at the Army War College, he would sometimes share the story of the young woman who had redefined his understanding of military precision. His students would listen with fascination and skepticism. The idea that someone could consistently hit targets at distances exceeding 3.8 kilometers seemed to belong more in the realm of fiction than military reality. Emily Rodriguez had shown him that in the right hands, with proper training and unwavering dedication, a single rifle could reach out across impossible distances to change the world. One shot at a time. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle that had first caught his attention that day at Fort Bragg had been transformed in Emily's hands from a mere weapon into an instrument of surgical precision. Her 3,847-meter shot remained burned in his memory as proof that individual excellence could still matter in an age of technological warfare. Emily Rodriguez had entered his life briefly, demonstrated capabilities that redefined his understanding of military precision, and then disappeared back into the classified world of special operations. The memory of her shooting would remain with Williams for the rest of his life as proof that extraordinary individuals could still change the course of history through the application of perfect skill at the crucial moment.